The rain initially whispered against the velvet room's tall windows, but soon escalated into an insistent drumming, each drop a tiny percussion against the glass. Emily Carter barely registered it. Her feet screamed in protest, her lower back pulsed with the familiar burning ache of 10 hours on her feet, and her thoughts were consumed with figuring out if tonight's tips would cover the past due electric bill, or if she'd once again have to choose between power and groceries. "Tven needs water," Marcus called from behind the bar, his voice cutting through the mellow jazz that drifted through the restaurant's main dining room. "And table 12 wants to see the dessert menu." Emily nodded, forcing her face into an approximation of pleasant attentiveness. She'd perfected this mask over 3 years of waiting tables. The smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, the posture that suggested she was thrilled to be there, the tone that made each customer feel like they were her sole concern in the world. It was exhausting, this constant performance, but mostly, it paid the bills. The Velvet Room resided in the heart of Manhattan's financial district, where power lunches morphed into power dinners, and the wine list cost more than Emily's monthly rent. She didn't truly belong here. The other servers boasted degrees from prestigious universities, spoke 3 languages fluently, and viewed this job as a springboard to something greater. Emily saw it as survival. She grabbed a pitcher of water and navigated to table 7, weaving between the tightly packed tables with the practiced grace of someone who'd learned to maneuver crowded spaces without disrupting a single conversation. The restaurant was packed tonight. Friday evenings always drew the crowds, men in $1,000 suits and women in designer dresses who barely acknowledged the people serving them. "Your water, sir," Emily said, filling the glasses with steady hands. The man at table 7, with his graying temples and a wedding ring that probably cost more than her car, didn't even glance up. He was too engrossed in a phone conversation about quarterly projections and market volatility. Emily had learned not to take it personally. To people like him, she was practically invisible. Turning away, she caught her reflection in one of the restaurant's many mirrors. 28 years old, but she looked older. Exhaustion etched itself in the shadows beneath her green eyes, and her auburn hair, pulled back in a functional ponytail, had lost its luster. She'd been pretty once, or so people had told her. Now she just looked worn out. The kitchen door swung open, and the head chef's assistant emerged carrying a tray of appetizers. Emily grabbed the dessert menus from the hostess stand and headed toward table 12, her mind already cycling through her evening routine. Finish her shift at 11, take the subway back to her studio in Queens, heat up whatever leftovers she'd managed to snag from the restaurant, collapse into bed, and wake up at 6 to repeat the whole thing. This was her life now. Small, contained, and safe. It hadn't always been this way. 3 years ago, she'd harbored dreams. Art school, a studio in Brooklyn, canvases bursting with color and light. But dreams required money, and money necessitated choices she'd rather not dwell on. Her father's medical expenses had devoured everything, the treatments that failed, the second opinions that offered no hope, the funeral that left her with nothing but debt, and a grief that weighed heavy in her chest, making it difficult to breathe on bad days. "Emily, you've got a new table. Section 4, booth in the corner," Rachel, the hostess, said as Emily passed. They just walked in. "Look important." Emily glanced toward section 4. A group of men were settling into the corner booth, the most private table in the restaurant, typically reserved weeks in advance for VIP clients. There were 5 of them, and even from across the room, Emily sensed something different about them. They moved with a controlled precision, their eyes constantly scanning the space, their body language suggesting they were more alert than relaxed. The man at the center of the group was the first to grab her attention. Mid-30s, dark hair styled with deliberate casualness, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him so perfectly it had to be custom-made. But it wasn't the expensive clothes that made Emily's instincts prickle. It was his bearing. An authority radiated from his posture, a quiet command that made the other men defer to him without a word. "I'll take it," Emily said, straightening her apron. Tips from important clients were usually generous, and she needed every dollar she could get. She approached the table with her practiced smile, notepad ready. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the Velvet Room. Can I start you off with something to drink?" The man in the center looked up, and Emily found herself locking eyes with a gaze so dark they were almost black. Intelligent eyes, calculating, taking in everything about her in a single sweep. Not in the way some men looked at her with unwanted interest, but with the cool assessment someone might give a chess piece they were deciding how to deploy. "Bring us a bottle of the Brunello 2015, he said. His voice was smooth, controlled, with the faintest hint of a New York accent. "And water for the table." "Excellent choice," Emily replied, jotting it down. "I'll have that right out for you. Have you had a chance to look at the menu? Or would you like a few minutes?" "We'll need a few minutes," one of the other men said, older than the others, maybe 50, with silver hair and a scar that traced along his jawline. His eyes were harder than the others, more suspicious. "And we'd like privacy while we talk." "Of course," Emily said smoothly. "I'll bring your wine and water, and I'll check back in 10 minutes. As she walked away, she felt their eyes on her back, particularly the intense gaze of the man in the center. She'd learned to categorize people over her years of serving. The ones who saw her as prey, the ones who didn't see her at all, the ones who treated her with basic respect. This group was different. They noticed everything, watched everything, and there was a tension among them that hinted this wasn't a casual dinner. Emily retrieved the wine from the cellar, going through the familiar motions of selecting the correct bottle, verifying the vintage, placing it in an ice bucket. Marcus raised an eyebrow as she passed the bar. "That's a $300 bottle," he said. "Your corner booth must be somebody." "They look like business types," Emily replied, though she wasn't entirely convinced. Something about them didn't quite align with the typical corporate crowd. She returned to table 4 with the wine and water, setting everything down with practiced efficiency. The men had been speaking in hushed tones, but they fell silent as she approached. The tension was palpable now, thick enough that Emily could feel it prickling against her skin. "Your Brunello," she said, showing the label to the man in the center. Protocol dictated she present it to whoever had ordered. "Would you like to taste it?" He nodded once, and Emily went through the ritual of opening the bottle, pouring a small amount into his glass, waiting while he swirled, sniffed, and tasted. He nodded again, and she filled the glasses for the other men, moving around the table with deliberate precision. That's when she noticed the man sitting directly across from the one who'd ordered, younger, nervous, his hands fidgeting with his napkin. He kept glancing at the windows, at the door, anywhere but at the men he was with. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the restaurant's comfortable temperature. Something was off. Emily had learned to read people in this job. It was essential to know when to be chatty and when to be scarce, when to push the expensive specials and when to let people order in peace. This young man was afraid, terrified actually, and the others knew it. "Are you ready to order? Or would you like more time?" Emily asked, keeping her voice neutral. "More time," the man in the center said, his attention shifting to the nervous young man across from him. "We're still discussing some business matters." Emily nodded and retreated, but something compelled her to linger near the bar, observing the table from the corner of her eye. The conversation at the booth had resumed, but the body language was all wrong. The man in the center leaned forward slightly, his posture deceptively relaxed, but his focus laser-sharp on the nervous young man. The others around the table had shifted, creating a barrier of sorts. This wasn't a business dinner. It was a confrontation. "You're staring," Marcus said quietly, polishing a wine glass. "Everything okay?" "I don't know," Emily murmured. "Something feels off." "Not our problem," Marcus replied, his tone gentle but firm. "We serve the food, collect the tips, go home. That's the job." He was right, of course. Emily had learned years ago not to get entangled in other people's dramas. She had enough of her own to manage. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. 10 minutes passed. Emily approached the table again, notepad ready. "Are you gentlemen ready to order?" The man in the center smiled, a controlled expression that didn't reach his eyes. "I'll have the filet medium rare." "Gentlemen?" He glanced around the table, and the others ordered quickly, efficiently. All except the nervous young man, who stammered through his order, his voice shaking slightly. Emily wrote everything down, repeated it back for confirmation, and headed toward the kitchen. As she pushed through the swinging door, she heard raised voices from the booth. Not loud enough to disturb other diners, but urgent enough to make her pause. "We need to talk about this," one of the men was saying. "There's nothing to talk about," came the smooth reply from the man in the center. "You made a choice. Now you deal with the consequences." The nervous young man said something Emily couldn't quite hear, but the fear in his voice was unmistakable. She submitted the order to the kitchen and tried to focus on her other tables. But her attention kept drifting back to the corner booth. The dynamic there had shifted. The nervous young man had gone pale, his hands trembling as he reached for his wine glass. The others had closed in somehow, their posture suggesting they weren't going to let him leave easily. Emily delivered orders to tables 9 and 11, refilled water glasses, recommended desserts, all while that knot of unease in her stomach grew tighter. She'd seen enough in her 28 years to recognize when a situation was dangerous. This qualified. The kitchen bell rang. The orders for table 4 were ready. Emily loaded the plates onto her tray, balancing them with the skill of someone who'd done this thousands of times, and headed back toward the corner booth. That's when everything changed. As Emily approached the table, her eyes automatically scanned the restaurant, checking if anyone needed anything, monitoring the flow of service. The rain was coming down harder now, streams of water blurring the view of the street. The lighting in the restaurant was dim, romantic, with small candles flickering on each table. And there, on the chest of the man in the center, the one who'd ordered the wine, the one who radiated authority and command, was a small red dot. Emily's breath hitched in her throat. She knew what that was. Everyone knew what that was. She'd seen it in movies, on television, in news reports showing crime scenes and investigations. A laser sight, a targeting device. Someone, somewhere outside this restaurant, had a weapon aimed directly at that man's chest. Time seemed to slow down. Emily's mind raced through possibilities. Should she scream, alert security, drop the tray and run? But those options would take too long. The red dot was steady now, centered perfectly over his heart. Whoever was out there was about to pull the trigger. The man hadn't noticed. None of them had. They were too engrossed in their conversation, focused on the nervous young man who was now talking rapidly, desperately trying to explain something. Emily had maybe 2 seconds to make a decision. Her body moved before her conscious mind caught up. She lunged forward, the tray tilting precariously in her hands, and accidentally stumbled, sending hot food and wine cascading directly onto the man's lap. He jerked backward with a sharp curse, standing abruptly. And in that instant, that precise fraction of a second, as he moved, the window behind him shattered. The sound was deafening. Glass exploded inward in a shower of glittering shards. People screamed. The carefully cultivated ambience of the velvet room erupted into chaos. Emily hit the ground hard, her ears ringing, her heart hammering so violently she thought it might burst through her ribs. Around her, people were diving under tables, scrambling for cover. Someone was yelling about getting down, staying low. Strong hands grabbed her arm, yanking her sideways. She found herself pulled behind the relative protection of the booth, pressed against the wall by bodies that had suddenly formed a protective barrier. Her face was inches from the floor, and she could see broken glass glittering like diamonds against the dark wood. "Don't move," a voice hissed in her ear. One of the men from the table. "Stay down." Emily couldn't have moved if she'd wanted to. Her muscles had locked, her body frozen in the grip of adrenaline and shock. She could hear shouting, the sound of chairs scraping, running footsteps. Someone was on a phone barking orders. The restaurant's background music still played incongruously smooth jazz accompanying absolute pandemonium. Gradually, the chaos began to organize itself. Restaurant security appeared, cordoning off the area around the broken window. Managers rushed between tables, checking on customers, trying to restore some semblance of order. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing closer. "Are you hurt?" The voice came from above her now, calm and controlled despite everything that had just happened. Emily looked up to find the man from the center of the booth crouching beside her. His suit was ruined, covered in wine and sauce, but his dark eyes were completely focused on her, sharp and assessing. I don't think so," Emily managed, her voice shakier than she wanted. She checked herself quickly. No blood, no pain beyond the jarring impact of hitting the floor. "I'm okay. What's your name?" he asked. "Emily. Emily Carter." "Emily," he said it slowly, as if testing its weight. Then his hand extended toward her, and she found herself being helped to her feet with surprising gentleness. That was quite a stumble. There was something in his tone, a knowing quality that made Emily's breath catch again. He knew. Somehow, he knew it hadn't been an accident. "I'm so sorry about your meal," Emily said automatically, falling back on her server training because she didn't know what else to do. "And your suit. I don't know what happened. You saved my life," he interrupted quietly, his voice low enough that only she could hear it over the surrounding commotion. "That's what happened." Emily met his eyes and saw the truth there. He'd put it together. The stumble, the timing, the bullet that had passed through the space where he'd been sitting just moments before. And now he was looking at her with an intensity that made her feel suddenly, acutely visible in a way she hadn't been in years. "I don't understand what's happening," Emily whispered, which was true. Her mind was still trying to catch up to the fact that someone had just attempted to hurt another person right in front of her. That she'd somehow prevented it. That her ordinary Friday night had just been shattered as thoroughly as that window. "I know you don't," he replied. Around them, his men had formed a loose circle, creating a barrier between their group and the rest of the restaurant. The older man with the scar was speaking urgently into a phone. The nervous young man from earlier had disappeared entirely. Emily hadn't even seen him leave. Authorities began flooding into the restaurant. First the uniformed officers, then others in suits who moved with purpose and authority. They began interviewing witnesses, taking statements, securing the scene. The restaurant manager was nearly in tears, apologizing profusely to everyone while trying to coordinate with the investigators. Emily stood frozen in the middle of it all, still not quite believing this was real. Part of her kept expecting to wake up at home in bed, the whole thing a stress-induced nightmare. "Miss Carter," an investigator approached her, badge displayed. "I understand you were serving the table when the incident occurred. I'm gonna need to get a statement from you." "Of course," Emily said numbly. "I'll tell you whatever you need to know." But before the investigator could ask his first question, the man from the booth stepped forward. "Officer, I'd like to request that Ms. Carter be allowed to give her statement at a later time. She's clearly in shock, and I think she needs medical attention first." "I'm fine," Emily protested automatically. "You're shaking," he observed, and Emily looked down to see that he was right. Her hands were trembling uncontrollably. "And you hit the ground pretty hard. I insist on having a medical professional check you out." There was something in his tone, not quite a command, but an expectation of compliance, that made the investigator pause and reassess. Emily saw the man slip something to the officer. A business card, she thought, and watched the officer's expression shift from routine professionalism to something more deferential. "Mr. Moretti," the officer said, his tone respectful now. "Of course, we can arrange for Ms. Carter to come in tomorrow to give her statement, but we will need to speak with her, naturally." "Naturally," the man Moretti replied smoothly. "She'll be available whenever you need her. You have my word." The officer nodded and moved away to continue his investigation. Emily found herself being guided toward the restaurant's back entrance by two of Moretti's men, with Moretti himself walking beside her. "Wait," Emily said, finding her voice. "My shift isn't over. I need to." "Your shift is definitely over," Moretti said, a hint of dark humor in his voice. "The restaurant is a crime scene now. Nobody's working tonight." He paused, studying her face. "Where do you live?" "Queens," Emily answered automatically, then wondered why she was telling him. "I can take the subway. I'll be fine." "You're not taking the subway," Moretti said firmly. "Vincent will drive you home." The older man with the scar, Vincent, apparently nodded once. Car's waiting. I don't need... Emily started to protest, but Moretti cut her off with a look. Emily, he said, and there was something almost gentle in the way he said her name. Someone just tried to hurt me in a room full of witnesses. They failed because of you. Do you understand what that means? Emily shook her head slowly, though a cold dread was starting to seep into her bones. It means you're now part of this, whether you want to be or not, Moretti continued. His hand touched her shoulder briefly, a light touch, but one that made her hyper-aware of his presence. It means the people who planned this might see you as a problem. It means your life just got complicated. I just spilled some food, Emily whispered, though they both knew it was a lie. You saw the targeting site, Moretti said quietly. You recognized what it was. You acted without hesitation, without thinking about your own safety. That kind of awareness, that kind of reflexive heroism is rare, and it saved my life. He paused, then added with quiet intensity, I don't forget debts like that. A black car pulled up to the back entrance. Expensive, sleek, windows tinted dark. Vincent held the door open, and Emily found herself being ushered inside before she could form another protest. Moretti leaned down, his hand resting on the car's roof, his dark eyes holding hers. Vincent, make sure she gets home safely. Tomorrow, someone will come by to check on you and coordinate your statement with the authorities. After that, he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. After that, we'll talk about what happens next. What happens next? Emily echoed, confusion and fear warring in her voice. You saved my life, Emily Carter, Moretti said, and there was something almost like a promise in his tone, though whether it was a promise of protection or something else entirely, Emily couldn't tell. That changes everything. The door closed, and the car pulled away from the restaurant. Emily twisted in her seat to look back through the rear window. The last thing she saw was Ryan Moretti standing in the rain, watching her leave, surrounded by his men and the flashing lights of emergency vehicles. Her hands were still shaking. The adrenaline was starting to wear off now, leaving her feeling hollow and exhausted and completely overwhelmed. She didn't understand what had just happened. Not really. She didn't understand who Ryan Moretti was, or why someone had wanted to hurt him, or what it meant that she'd prevented it. But as the car carried her through the rain-slicked streets of Manhattan toward her small studio in Queens, one thing had become terribly, undeniably clear. Her small, contained, safe life, the one she'd built so carefully out of the ruins of her dreams, had just been shattered as completely as that restaurant window. And there was no going back. Emily didn't sleep that night. She sat in her studio apartment, still wearing her wine-stained uniform, watching the numbers on her digital clock change with agonizing slowness. 2:47 a.m. became 2:48, then 2:49. Outside her window, Queens was mostly quiet, save for the occasional siren in the distance and the rumble of late-night traffic on the expressway. Her hands had finally stopped shaking around midnight, but her mind wouldn't stop replaying those few seconds. The split-second decision to move, the shattering glass. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it again, that small point of light trembling on Ryan Moretti's chest, steady and precise, promising something terrible. She'd Googled his name on her phone during the car ride home. The results had made her stomach drop. Ryan Moretti, 34 years old, CEO of Moretti Enterprises, a company with interests in construction, real estate development, and import-export, born and raised in Brooklyn. His father, Alejandro Moretti, had been a prominent businessman who'd passed away 10 years ago under circumstances the articles described as controversial. His older brother, Marcus, had been gone for 7 years, an accident, the official report said, though the news stories hinted at other possibilities. On paper, Ryan Moretti was a legitimate businessman. But the way the articles were written, the carefully neutral, the way they talked, the things they left unsaid, it all painted a picture of someone who moved in circles where official titles and legitimate businesses were just a facade for something far more complex and shadowy. Emily had dedicated 3 years to perfecting the art of staying out of other people's messes. She'd mastered keeping her head down, doing her job, taking home her paycheck, and going home. The world was overflowing with complicated situations that weren't her problem to untangle or fix. But she'd gotten involved anyway. She'd seen that little red dot and reacted without thinking. And now, according to Ryan Moretti himself, she was a part of this. What did that even mean? The knock on her door came at 9:17 a.m. Just as Emily was forcing down a piece of toast she didn't even want. She'd finally changed out of her work uniform, washing away the wine, the heavy sweat, and the lingering scent of expensive Italian food. Now she was wearing jeans and an old college sweatshirt, her hair still damp, with dark circles under her eyes that even concealer couldn't quite hide. She approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. A woman stood in the hallway, early 30s, dressed professionally, dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She was holding a briefcase and wore an expression of patient waiting. "Miss Carter," the woman called. "My name is Diana Rossi. Mr. Moretti sent me to check on you and discuss some matters related to last night's incident." Emily opened the door, but kept the chain lock fastened, leaving a gap of only a few inches. "How did you find out where I live?" "The restaurant has your address on file for your employment records," Diana replied smoothly. "May I come in? I promise this won't take long." Every instinct Emily had developed over years of living in the city screamed at her not to let a stranger into her apartment. But Diana Rossi didn't seem threatening. She looked like a lawyer or an accountant, someone who solved problems with paperwork, not force. Emily unhooked the chain and opened the door. Diana stepped inside, her eyes quickly taking in the small studio. The unmade Murphy bed was still pulled down from the wall, the kitchenette with its mismatched dishes, the single window with its view of the building across the alley. It wasn't much, but it was clean, and it was Emily's. "Thank you," Diana said, placing her briefcase on the small table that served as Emily's dining area, desk, and craft space. "First, how are you feeling? Any injuries from last night?" "I'm fine," Emily said automatically. "Just shaken up." "Understandable." Diana opened her briefcase and pulled out a tablet. "I need to inform you that investigators will want to speak with you sometime today. They'll call to set up a time. When they do, you'll need to go downtown to give your statement." "Okay," Emily said slowly. "Is that what you came here to tell me?" "Partially." Diana's fingers moved across the tablet screen. "I'm also here to discuss some practical matters. Your place of employment is currently closed pending investigation. The restaurant owner isn't sure when they'll be able to reopen. There's significant damage to repair, and there are legal considerations. You won't be able to work there for at least the next several weeks." The words hit Emily like a punch to the gut. "Several weeks? I can't. I have rent due in 2 weeks. I have bills. I need to work." "Mr. Moretti anticipated this concern," Diana said calmly. She reached into her briefcase again and pulled out an envelope. "This is compensation for your lost wages during the closure period, plus additional funds to cover any expenses you might incur. Consider it a thank you for your quick thinking last night." Emily stared at the envelope Diana held out to her. "I don't want his money. Ms. Carter, be practical. You need to survive. This isn't charity. It's acknowledgement of a debt." Diana set the envelope on the table between them. "You prevented something terrible from happening. The least Mr. Moretti can do is ensure you don't suffer financially because of it." Emily's hands clenched at her sides. Everything about this felt wrong. The money, this polished woman in her apartment, the way her life was being rearranged by forces she didn't understand. "I just want things to go back to normal." "That's not possible," Diana said, and there was something almost sympathetic in her tone. "Not immediately, anyway. The people who planned what happened last night, they're still out there. They're going to be looking for information about what went wrong with their plan. Your name is going to come up in investigation reports. They're going to know you were involved." Fear crystallized in Emily's chest. "Are you saying I'm in danger?" "I'm saying the situation is complicated," Diana replied carefully. "Mr. Moretti takes his obligations seriously. He wants to ensure your safety while things settle down. That means some precautions need to be taken." "What kind of precautions?" Diana pulled something up on her tablet and turned it to show Emily. It was a building, modern and secure-looking, in what appeared to be a nice neighborhood. Mr. Moretti has arranged temporary housing for you in Manhattan. It's a secure building with 24-hour security, a doorman, cameras. You'd be much safer there than here. Emily looked around her studio apartment, her space, her sanctuary, the place where she'd rebuilt her life after everything fell apart. It wasn't much, but it was hers. I'm not leaving my home. Ms. Carter Emily interrupted. No. She crossed her arms, trying to project a confidence she didn't entirely feel. I appreciate the concern, but I'm not going into hiding because something happened at my job. I didn't do anything wrong. Diana studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I understand, but will you at least accept enhanced security? Someone to keep an eye on your building, make sure nothing unusual happens. You mean surveillance? Emily said flatly. I mean protection, Diana corrected. There's a difference. Emily wanted to refuse that too, wanted to maintain the independence she'd fought so hard to establish. But she wasn't stupid. Someone had tried to hurt Ryan Moretti in a crowded restaurant, displaying a level of boldness that suggested they were either desperate or confident. If they found out she'd interfered. Fine, Emily said reluctantly. But I want to be clear. I'm not part of whatever Mr. Moretti is involved in. I spilled some food and got lucky with my timing. That's all. Diana's expression suggested she didn't believe that any more than Emily did. But she simply nodded. Of course. Now, about your statement to the investigators. They spent the next 20 minutes going over what Emily should and shouldn't say. Diana's advice was simple. Tell the truth, but only what was directly asked. Yes, she'd been serving the table. Yes, she'd accidentally stumbled and spilled the order. Yes, she'd seen the window break and heard people screaming. No, she didn't know anything about the individuals at the table beyond their dinner orders. Don't speculate, Diana emphasized. Don't offer theories, just answer the questions you're asked. After Diana left, Emily sat alone in her apartment, staring at the envelope of money on her table. She didn't want to open it. Opening it felt like accepting something she couldn't take back, like crossing a line she couldn't uncross. But her rent was due in 12 days, and her bank account had barely enough to cover it. Even before this happened, pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. She opened the envelope. The amount inside made her gasp. It was enough to cover 3 months of rent, with plenty left over for bills and groceries, and even some savings. It was more money than she'd seen in one place since before her father got sick. Emily's hands trembled as she put the cash back in the envelope and hid it in the freezer, an old trick she'd learned from her mother. Her emotions were a tangled mess she couldn't begin to unpack, gratitude warring with resentment, relief with fear, and underneath it all, a growing sense that her life had fundamentally changed in ways she was only beginning to understand. The call from the investigators came at 2:30 p.m. They were polite but firm. They needed her statement today. Could she come downtown at 4 p.m.? Emily agreed, then spent an hour getting ready with the same care she'd take for a job interview. Professional clothes, minimal makeup, hair neat. She wanted to look responsible, trustworthy, like someone who genuinely just had bad timing with a dinner tray. The police station was exactly as unwelcoming as she'd expected. Fluorescent lights, hard chairs, the smell of bad coffee, and old paperwork. Emily sat in an interview room across from 2 investigators who introduced themselves with names she immediately forgot, too nervous to retain the information. They asked their questions. Emily answered them, following Diana's advice to stick to simple facts. Yes, she'd been working. Yes, she'd been serving that particular table. No, she'd never seen any of those men before last night. Yes, she'd stumbled. She'd been on her feet for hours. She was tired. Accidents happened. You have remarkably good reflexes, one investigator observed. To stumble at the exact moment someone fired through that window. I guess I got lucky, Emily replied, keeping her voice steady. If I'd fallen a second later, I might have been hurt too. They couldn't argue with that. After an hour of questions that circled around the same basic facts, they finally let her go. As Emily was leaving, One of the investigators called after her. "Miss Carter, be careful. The people Mr. Moretti associates with, they're not the kind you want to get involved with." Emily turned back. "I'm not involved with anyone. I just work at a restaurant." "Worked," the investigator corrected gently. "Past tense. That restaurant's going to be closed for a while. Might be a good time to find employment somewhere else. Somewhere safer." The implication was clear. Distance yourself from this situation while you still can. Emily left the police station with those words echoing in her mind. The evening air was cool. Autumn settling into the city with its promise of shorter days and colder nights. She stood on the sidewalk, trying to decide whether to take the subway home or walk for a while to clear her head. The decision was made for her when a familiar black car pulled up to the curb. Vincent, the older man with the scar from last night, rolled down the passenger window. "Get in, Miss Carter. Mr. Moretti would like to speak with you." "I gave my statement to the investigators," Emily said, staying on the sidewalk. "I don't have anything else to say." "This isn't about the statement, please." Vincent's tone was respectful but firm. "It's important." Emily hesitated. She could refuse, could turn and walk away and hope that would be the end of it. But deep down, she knew it wouldn't be. Whatever had started last night wasn't finished. She got in the car. They drove through Manhattan as the sun set, painting the buildings in shades of gold and amber. Vincent didn't make conversation, and Emily was grateful for the silence. She watched the city pass by the windows, trying to calm her racing heart. The car pulled into an underground parking garage beneath a building that looked like luxury condominiums. Vincent led her to a private elevator that required a key card to operate. They rose smoothly upward, past floor after floor, until they reached the penthouse level. The elevator doors opened directly into an apartment that took Emily's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Central Park and the Manhattan skyline. The furnishings were modern and expensive, all clean lines and quality materials. But there was something impersonal about the space, as if no one actually lived there. Ryan Moretti stood by the windows, his back to her, looking out over the city. He'd changed since last night, now wearing dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Even in casual clothing, he projected that same sense of controlled authority. "Thank you, Vincent," he said without turning around. "That will be all." Vincent nodded to Emily and left. The elevator doors closed, and Emily was alone with Ryan Moretti in his penthouse apartment, 40 stories above the city, with nowhere to run even if she wanted to. "How did your statement go?" Ryan asked, finally turning to face her. "Fine. I told them what happened." Emily stayed near the elevator, maintaining distance. "Look, I appreciate the money and the concern for my safety, but I don't want to be involved in whatever this is." "I know you don't," Ryan replied. He moved to a bar cart and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid whiskey, probably from a bottle that looked older than Emily. He offered her one, but she shook her head. He shrugged and took a sip from his own glass. "Unfortunately, wanting something and getting it are 2 different things. The investigator told me to stay away from you," Emily said bluntly. He said, "You're dangerous." "He's not wrong," Ryan said with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I am dangerous. I've had to be. The world I operate in doesn't reward gentleness or mercy." "Then why am I here?" Emily demanded, frustration overriding her fear. "If you're so dangerous, if I should stay away, then let me go. Forget I exist." "I can't do that." Ryan set his glass down and approached her slowly, like someone approaching a skittish animal. "Do you understand what happened last night? Truly understand it?" "Someone tried to hurt you," Emily said. "I prevented it. End of story." "Someone tried to take me out during a business meeting," Ryan corrected. "In a public place with witnesses, with my own people around me. That takes planning, resources, and, most importantly, information. Someone on my team gave up my location, my schedule, my security arrangements." Emily's mouth went dry. "You mean someone you trust betrayed you?" "Exactly." Ryan's dark eyes held hers. "And now I need to find out who before they try again. which means everyone close to me is under suspicion. Everyone except you. Me? Emily's voice came out higher than intended. You don't know anything about me. I know you had no reason to help me, Ryan said quietly. I know you risked your own safety without hesitation. I know you're not part of my world, which means you're not part of anyone else's world either. You're clean, uncomplicated. He paused, then added, and you're smart. You saw that targeting sight from across the room in dim lighting. You recognized what it meant and acted in seconds. That kind of awareness is rare. Emily's back was literally against the wall. She'd retreated until the elevator doors stopped her. What do you want from me? I want you to trust me, Ryan said. I know that's asking a lot, but the people who planned last night's incident, they're going to figure out what went wrong. They're going to review security footage, interview witnesses, connect dots. Your name is going to come up. And when it does, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Emily could imagine it well enough. So what happens now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan was quiet for a long moment, studying her face as if trying to read her thoughts. Then he said, now you have a choice to make. You can go back to your apartment in Queens, hope for the best, and pray that nobody decides you're a liability worth eliminating. Or you accept my protection. Real protection, not just a security guard watching your building. You stay somewhere safe, somewhere I can guarantee no one will reach you, just until we sort out who the traitor is and eliminate the threat. You mean hide, Emily said flatly. I mean survive, Ryan corrected. There's no shame in that. Emily closed her eyes, trying to think through the exhaustion and fear. This couldn't be her life. 24 hours ago, her biggest concern was whether her tips would cover her electric bill. Now she was standing in a penthouse apartment, being offered protection from threats she'd only just learned existed by a man who admitted he was dangerous. How long? She finally asked. I don't know, Ryan admitted. Could be days, could be weeks. I have people working on it, investigating, asking questions, applying pressure in the right places. But these things take time. And what would I do while I'm in hiding? Just sit in some secure apartment going crazy? You could work for me, Ryan said. The suggestion seemed to surprise him almost as much as it surprised Emily. I have legitimate businesses, restaurants, properties, import companies. You could handle administrative work, accounting, scheduling, something to keep you busy and give you purpose. I don't know anything about those things, Emily protested. You're smart. You'd learn. Ryan's expression softened slightly. Look, Emily, I'm not trying to trap you or control your life. I'm trying to keep you alive. You saved me. That means something. In my world, debts like that matter. They're sacred. I can't let something happen to you because you helped me. There was sincerity in his voice that Emily hadn't expected. This wasn't a manipulation or a power play. Ryan Moretti genuinely believed she was in danger, and he genuinely wanted to prevent that. What if I say no? Emily asked. What if I just want to go home and pretend none of this happened? Then I'll respect that choice, Ryan said quietly. But I'll also have Vincent follow you everywhere you go, and I'll station people outside your building 24/7, and I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe whether you want me to or not, because that's what honor demands. Emily almost laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. You're basically giving me a choice between hiding in a nice apartment or being constantly followed. I'm giving you a choice between accepting help and making this harder on both of us, Ryan corrected. He extended his hand toward her. What do you say, Emily Carter? Will you trust me just for a little while? Emily looked at his outstretched hand, then up at his face. He was dangerous. The investigator had been right about that. But he was also, in his own way, trying to do the right thing. And the alternative, going back to her small apartment and hoping nobody decided she knew too much, suddenly seemed far more frightening than accepting help from a man who at least admitted what he was. She took his hand. His grip was firm but not crushing, his palm warm against hers. Okay, she whispered. I'll accept your help, but I want rules. I want boundaries, and I want your word that when this is over, I can go back to my life. You have my word, Ryan said solemnly. When this is over, you're free to go. No obligations, no strings attached. Except the debt you keep talking about, Emily pointed out. Ryan smiled, a real smile this time. One that transformed his face from intimidating to almost handsome. Except that. But don't worry, I'm a patient man. I can wait as long as it takes to repay that particular obligation. Emily wasn't sure what he meant by that, and she wasn't sure she wanted to know. She pulled her hand back, creating distance again. When would I need to move? Tonight, if possible. Tomorrow at the latest. We'll collect anything you need from your apartment. Clothes, personal items, whatever makes you comfortable. The rest can stay there. Your rent will be paid on time, your utilities maintained. When this is over, everything will be exactly as you left it. It was all happening so fast. Emily's life, which had been so carefully controlled and predictable, was being swept up in a current she couldn't fight. But maybe that was okay. Maybe it was time to stop fighting the current and see where it took her. All right, she said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Let's do this. Ryan nodded, something like respect crossing his features. He moved to a nearby table and picked up a phone, pressing a single button. Vincent, we're ready. Prepare the guest suite and arrange transportation back to Miss Carter's apartment so she can collect her things. As he made arrangements, Emily walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out over Central Park. The sun had fully set now, and the city blazed with artificial light, millions of points of brightness against the darkness. Somewhere out there, people were having normal Friday nights, going to movies, eating dinner with friends, worrying about normal things. Emily's normal life was over, at least for now. In its place was something uncertain and frightening. And, if she was being honest with herself, almost exciting in a terrifying way. She'd saved Ryan Moretti's life. Now he was going to try to save hers. Emily just hoped they both survived the process. 3 weeks. Emily had been living in Ryan Moretti's world for 3 weeks, and she still wasn't sure if she'd made the right choice. The guest suite turned out to be a 2-bedroom apartment on the 38th floor of the same building as Ryan's penthouse, modern, spacious, with views that made her old studio in Queens look like a closet. Everything was provided. Furniture, linens, a fully stocked kitchen, even fresh flowers that someone replaced twice a week. It was beautiful and comfortable and felt absolutely nothing like home. Emily stood at the window on a gray November morning, watching clouds roll across the Manhattan skyline. The weather had turned cold over the past few days, that bitter kind of chill that warned winter was coming whether you were ready or not. Down below, people rushed along the sidewalks, bundled in coats and scarves, living their normal lives while Emily existed in this strange bubble of luxury and uncertainty. Her phone buzzed. A message from Diana Rossi. Meeting at 10 a.m. Conference room B. Bring the quarterly reports you've been reviewing. Right. Work. Because, apparently, hiding from potential threats meant spending 8 hours a day learning the intricacies of Moretti Enterprises' legitimate business operations. To her surprise, Emily had discovered she was actually good at it. The administrative work came naturally, organizing schedules, reviewing contracts, identifying discrepancies in financial reports. Ryan had been right when he said she'd learn quickly. What he hadn't mentioned was how much of his business empire operated in that gray area between legal and questionable, where everything looked legitimate on paper but felt weighted with unspoken implications. She'd learned not to ask too many questions. When a shipment manifest didn't quite match the customs documentation, she noted the discrepancy but didn't investigate why. When certain clients received preferential treatment that made no business sense, she processed the paperwork without comment. This was the price of her protection. Seeing things she wasn't supposed to see and pretending she didn't understand what they meant. Emily dressed carefully for the meeting, a navy blazer over a white blouse, tailored pants, low heels. Diana had taken her shopping during the first week, insisting that if Emily was going to work for Moretti Enterprises, she needed to look the part. The clothes she wore were nicer than anything Emily had ever owned. Yet she still felt like she was playing dress-up, pretending to be someone else. The conference room on the 40th floor was already in use when Emily got there. Diana was seated at the head of the table, her tablet open, reviewing something with her trademark laser focus. Vincent was there, too, looking out of place in formal business attire. He was much more comfortable in the security role he usually filled. And Ryan, naturally, was standing by the windows with his back to the room, speaking softly into his phone. "Morning," Emily said, taking a seat and pulling out the report she'd spent the last 2 days poring over. "I found some interesting patterns in the third quarter numbers." "Interesting how?" Diana asked, immediately turning her attention to Emily. "The construction division is showing consistent cost overruns on 3 specific projects, all in Brooklyn, and all using the same subcontractors. However, the final invoices don't match up with the actual work completed, according to the inspection reports." Emily brought up her notes. Either someone's padding the invoices, or the inspection reports are inaccurate. Diana and Vincent exchanged a look Emily had come to recognize. It was the "you've stumbled onto something significant that we can't directly explain" look. "Good catch," Diana said carefully. "I'll look into it." Ryan finished his phone call and turned around. He looked tired, Emily noticed, with shadows under his eyes that suggested he wasn't getting enough sleep. Over the past 3 weeks, she'd learned to read his moods through subtle clues. The tension she saw in his shoulders right now meant something was troubling him. "Emily," he said, acknowledging her presence with a slight nod. "How are you settling in?" It was a question he asked regularly, as if he were genuinely concerned about her well-being. Emily still wasn't sure what to make of that. "Fine," she replied. "The apartment is comfortable. I'm getting used to the work. Just fine." Ryan's dark eyes studied her face. "You look restless." Emily hesitated. She'd been trying to maintain a professional distance, to treat this situation like any other job, despite its obvious complications. But Ryan had an unsettling knack for seeing through her carefully constructed walls. "I'm not used to being confined," she admitted. "I know I can leave the building, but there's always someone watching, always security nearby. It feels like being in a very nice prison." "I understand that," Ryan said quietly. "And I'm sorry, but the situation hasn't resolved itself yet." "Have you found the traitor?" Emily asked, and immediately wished she hadn't. That question probably fell into the category of things she wasn't supposed to ask. But Ryan didn't deflect. "We've narrowed it down to 3 possibilities. People I've worked with for years. People I trusted." His jaw tightened. "That's the part that makes this difficult. Knowing someone close to me decided I was worth more gone than alive." There was genuine hurt beneath his controlled exterior, and Emily felt a sudden wave of sympathy. She knew what betrayal felt like. Her ex-boyfriend had left when her father got sick, unable to deal with the stress and the medical bills and Emily's grief. That abandonment had taught her that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. "What happens when you figure out who it is?" Emily asked, not sure she wanted to know the answer. "We handle it," Vincent said gruffly. "That's all you need to know." "Vincent's right," Ryan agreed. "The less you know about certain aspects of this situation, the better. But I promise you, Emily, once we've dealt with the threat, you're free to return to your life." Did she even want to return to her life? The question popped into Emily's head out of nowhere. 3 weeks ago, the answer would have been an unqualified yes. But now, after seeing how the other half lived, after discovering she had skills and intelligence that could be valued beyond carrying plates and taking drink orders. "Let's focus on the quarterly reports," Diana interjected smoothly, sensing the conversation was veering into uncomfortable territory. "Emily, walk us through what you found." The meeting lasted 2 hours. Emily presented her analysis, fielded questions, and found herself actually enjoying the intellectual challenge of it. Diana was impressed. Emily could tell by the way she asked follow-up questions and took notes. Even Vincent, who'd been suspicious of her at first, had warmed up over the weeks, occasionally offering a gruff, "Good work," when she identified something important. Ryan mostly listened, but Emily felt his attention on her throughout the meeting. It was unnerving and oddly flattering at the same time, the way he focused completely when she spoke, as if her words were the only thing that mattered in that moment. After the meeting ended, Diana and Vincent left to handle other business. Emily gathered her materials, preparing to head back to her apartment office, but Ryan's voice stopped her. "Emily, stay for a moment." She turned back, finding him still by the windows, looking out over the city. The gray morning light cast shadows across his face, emphasizing the strong line of his jaw and the weariness he was trying to hide. "Yes," Emily prompted when he didn't immediately speak. "You've been here 3 weeks," Ryan said, still not looking at her. "You've worked hard, asked minimal questions, adapted to a situation that most people couldn't handle. I appreciate that. You're paying me well and keeping me safe," Emily replied. "It's not exactly a hardship, is it?" Ryan finally turned to face her, and the intensity in his dark eyes made her breath catch. "You gave up your freedom, your independence, your normal life. You're living in isolation, working for a man you barely know, surrounded by a world you never asked to be part of. That requires strength most people don't have." Emily shifted uncomfortably under his scrutiny. "I'm just doing what I need to do to survive." "No," Ryan said softly, moving closer. "You're doing much more than that. You're thriving. Diana tells me you're the best analyst she's worked with in years. Vincent says you have better instincts about people than half his security team. You're not just surviving, Emily. You're discovering who you really are." His words hit harder than Emily expected. Was he right? Had these 3 weeks shown her a version of herself she'd never known existed? The Emily who'd worked at the Velvet Room had been worn down by life, just trying to get through each day. This Emily, the one wearing designer clothes and analyzing financial reports and living 40 floors above the city, felt different, stronger, more capable. "I don't know who I am anymore," Emily admitted quietly. "Everything changed so fast." "Change isn't always bad," Ryan said. He was close enough now that Emily could smell his cologne. Something subtle and expensive that made her more aware of him than she wanted to be. "Sometimes it shows us possibilities we never considered." "Is that what happened to you?" Emily asked, finding courage from somewhere. "Did circumstances change you into what you are now?" Ryan's expression flickered, surprise. Then something darker. "Yes, I wasn't always this person. I had different dreams, different wants, different plans. But life has a way of making choices for us, and we either adapt or we don't survive." "What were your dreams?" Emily found herself genuinely curious about this complicated man who'd inserted himself into her life so completely. "Architecture," Ryan said, and a ghost of a smile crossed his face. "I wanted to design buildings, create spaces where people could live and work and feel safe. I went to Columbia for 2 years studying design and structural engineering." "What happened?" "My father was taken from us," Ryan said simply. "And my brother stepped up to run the family businesses, but Marcus was too trusting, too willing to see the best in people. That weakness got him hurt badly 7 years ago. He survived, but he couldn't continue in the role. So, I came home, left school, took over responsibilities I never wanted. I've been doing it ever since." Emily heard the weight of regret in his voice, the ghost of the person he might have been. "Do you ever wish you could go back? Choose differently?" "Every day," Ryan admitted. "But wishing doesn't change reality. I made my choice. I built this empire, protected my family's legacy, kept the people who depend on me safe. That has to be enough." They stood in silence for a moment, and Emily realized how little distance remained between them. She could see the flecks of lighter brown in his dark eyes, could count the faint lines at the corners that suggested he smiled more than his serious demeanor usually showed. "Emily," Ryan said, his voice lower now, almost uncertain, an unfamiliar quality coming from someone usually so controlled. "I need to tell you something." Her heart rate picked up. "What?" "These past 3 weeks, having you here, working with you, talking to you." He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "You've reminded me that there's more to life than business and strategy and managing threats. You see things differently. You question things I take for granted. You make me think about possibilities I'd stopped considering." "Ryan," Emily started, not sure where this was going, but feeling the conversation shift into dangerous territory. "I'm not saying this to make you uncomfortable," Ryan continued. "I'm saying it because you deserve honesty. You've been honest with me about your fears, your frustrations, your uncertainty. I owe you the same courtesy. What are you trying to say? Emily asked, though part of her already knew, and wasn't sure she was ready to hear it. I'm saying that keeping you safe has become about more than honoring a debt, Ryan said quietly. I'm saying that when I see you every day, when we talk about business or life, or nothing at all, I feel something I haven't felt in years. Something I didn't think I was capable of feeling anymore. Emily's mouth went dry. This was a complication she definitely didn't need. Getting emotionally involved with Ryan Moretti would be beyond foolish. It would be potentially self-destructive. He was dangerous, complex, living a life that existed in moral gray areas she'd spent years trying to avoid. But her treacherous heart didn't seem to care about any of that. Because somewhere over the past 3 weeks, she'd started looking forward to their morning meetings and their occasional late-night conversations when neither of them could sleep. She'd started noticing the way his rare smiles transformed his face, the intelligence in his eyes when he talked about something he cared about, the gentleness in his hands when he'd helped her once with a paper cut that had bled more than expected. This is a bad idea, Emily whispered, but she didn't step back. Probably the worst, Ryan agreed. You should walk away right now. Go back to your apartment. Maintain professional distance. Wait for this situation to resolve so you can return to your real life. That's the smart choice. It is, Emily said. Neither of them moved. Ryan, Emily started, but whatever she was going to say was cut short by the conference room door opening abruptly. Vincent stood there, his expression grim. Boss, we have a problem. Marco just called. There's been an incident at the Red Hook warehouse. The moment shattered. Ryan's demeanor shifted instantly from uncertain to commanding, all traces of vulnerability vanishing behind his professional mask. What kind of incident? Fire. Authorities are calling it suspicious. Someone's making a move. Ryan's jaw tightened. Get the car ready. I want to see the damage personally. He glanced at Emily. This conversation isn't over. Then he was gone, Vincent following, leaving Emily alone in the conference room with her heart pounding and her mind racing. What had just happened? Had Ryan Moretti, dangerous, complicated, powerful Ryan Moretti, just admitted he had feelings for her? And more importantly, why hadn't she immediately shut that down? Because you have feelings for him, too. A traitorous voice in her head whispered. Asterisk, because somewhere between being terrified of him and working alongside him and learning who he really is beneath that intimidating exterior, you started caring about him. This was bad. This was potentially disastrous. Emily had worked so hard to rebuild her life after her father's passing, to create stability and safety and predictability. Getting emotionally entangled with someone like Ryan threatened all of that. But as Emily returned to her apartment and tried to focus on work, she couldn't stop replaying their conversation, the vulnerability in Ryan's voice, the way he'd looked at her like she was something precious and unexpected, the admission that she'd reminded him there was more to life than the empire he'd built. Her phone buzzed. A message from Diana. Ryan will be out for the rest of the day. He asked me to make sure you have everything you need. Emily stared at the message, then typed back, I'm fine, thank you. But she wasn't fine. She was confused and conflicted and feeling things she had no business feeling for a man whose world was so different from everything she'd known. The afternoon dragged. Emily tried to work but couldn't concentrate. She made lunch but barely tasted it. She stood at the window watching the city below, wondering where Ryan was and if he was safe, and hating herself for caring. Evening came. Emily had just decided to order dinner when there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Ryan standing there, and her heart did that annoying flutter thing it had started doing whenever she saw him. He looked exhausted, tie loosened, shirt sleeves rolled up, soot smudges on his collar that suggested he'd been at the fire scene personally, but his eyes were alert as they met hers. Can I come in? He asked. Emily stepped aside, letting him enter. The apartment suddenly felt smaller with his presence filling it. He moved to the window she'd been standing at earlier, looking out at the darkness punctuated by the city lights. The warehouse fire was deliberately set, Ryan said without preamble. Professional job. Someone wanted to send a message. What kind of message? Emily asked, even though she suspected she shouldn't. That they're still out there, still planning, still dangerous. Ryan turned to face her. The investigation is taking longer than I hoped. I know you're frustrated with the limitations on your freedom, but I need you to be patient a little longer. I can be patient, Emily said quietly. That's not what's bothering me. Then what is? Emily took a deep breath. This conversation needed to happen, even though every instinct told her to avoid it. What you said this morning about feeling something. We can't do this, Ryan. Whatever this is, it's a bad idea for about 100 different reasons. Name 3, Ryan challenged, moving closer. You're my boss, Emily started. Technically, you work for Moretti Enterprises, not me personally. You're dangerous. To my enemies, never to you. We're from completely different worlds. So what? Ryan was close now, close enough that Emily had to tilt her head back slightly to maintain eye contact. Emily, I've spent years building walls around myself, keeping everyone at a distance because trust is a weakness in my world. But you walk through those walls without even trying. You see me, not the reputation, not the empire, not the person everyone else sees. You see the man I actually am. And who are you? Emily whispered. Someone who's tired of being alone, Ryan said simply. Someone who wants to believe that maybe, despite everything, there's still room in my life for something real. Someone who looks at you and sees possibilities I thought I'd lost forever. Emily's resolve was crumbling. She should maintain professional distance. She should protect herself from the inevitable complications. She should remember that in a few weeks or months, this situation would end and she'd return to her normal life, and Ryan would remain in his world of power and danger. But she didn't want to be sensible right now. She wanted to be brave, even if brave meant doing something potentially foolish. Ryan, she said softly, if we do this, if we acknowledge that there's something between us, everything gets more complicated. Everything's already complicated, Ryan pointed out. His hand reached up, his fingers gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch sent a jolt of electricity through Emily's nervous system. The question is whether the complication is worth it. Is it? Emily asked, her voice barely audible. Instead of answering with words, Ryan closed the remaining distance between them. He cupped her face with surprising gentleness, his thumb tracing her cheekbone as his dark eyes searched hers for permission. Emily gave it by rising on her toes and closing the final gap. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, questioning, as if they were both afraid this fragile thing between them might shatter under too much pressure. But then Emily's hands found their way to Ryan's shoulders, and his arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer, and the kiss deepened into something more urgent, more real. When they finally broke apart, both breathing harder, Emily rested her forehead against Ryan's chest and felt his heart beating as rapidly as her own. This is crazy, she murmured. Completely insane. Ryan agreed, his voice rough, his arms tightening around her. But maybe crazy is exactly what we both need. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other in the growing darkness, the city lights twinkling outside like distant stars. Emily knew this changed everything. She knew there would be consequences and complications and probably heartbreak down the road. But right now, in Ryan's arms, feeling more alive than she had in years, Emily couldn't bring herself to care about the future. For once, in her carefully controlled life, she was going to embrace the present and see where it led, even if it led somewhere dangerous, especially if it led somewhere dangerous. Because Emily Carter was discovering that the woman she'd become over these past 3 weeks wasn't content with safe anymore. She wanted real. She wanted passionate. She wanted to feel something beyond the numbness that had defined her life for so long. And Ryan Moretti, for all his complications and contradictions, made her feel more than she'd ever thought possible. Stay tonight, Emily whispered. Just stay. Ryan pulled back enough to look at her face, his expression serious. Are you sure? No, Emily admitted. But I don't want to be alone, and I don't think you do either. A slow smile crossed Ryan's face, the genuine kind that made him look younger, less burdened. I'll stay. They moved to the couch and Ryan pulled Emily against his side. She fit there perfectly, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. They talked quietly about inconsequential things, favorite movies, childhood memories, dreams they'd both given up on. It was the kind of conversation Emily hadn't had with anyone in years, intimate and honest and unexpectedly comfortable. Somewhere around midnight, Emily drifted off to sleep, feeling safer than she had since this whole situation began. Ryan stayed awake longer, watching her sleep, his expression shifting between wonder and concern and something that looked almost like fear. Because Ryan Moretti knew what Emily didn't yet understand, that what was growing between them was more dangerous than any business rival or betrayer. It was the kind of connection that could destroy them both if they weren't careful. But looking at Emily, brave, brilliant, beautiful Emily who'd saved his life and challenged his assumptions and made him feel human again, Ryan realized he didn't care about the danger. Some things were worth the risk. Some people were worth fighting for. And Emily Carter had somehow become the most important person in his world, whether she understood that yet or not. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. And inside the 38th floor apartment, two people from different worlds found something unexpected in each other's arms. Hope. The call came at 4:47 a.m. Emily woke to Ryan's phone vibrating insistently on the coffee table, his body tensing instantly beside her. They'd fallen asleep on the couch, still dressed, wrapped in each other's arms like teenagers, afraid to take things too far too fast. Ryan grabbed the phone, his voice alert despite the early hour. "Talk to me." Emily sat up, watching his expression shift from sleepy contentment to hard focus in seconds. Whatever news he was receiving wasn't good. "When?" Ryan asked sharply. "How many?" A pause. "No, don't move until I get there. 20 minutes. He ended the call and was on his feet immediately, straightening his clothes with efficient movements. "I have to go. There's been a development." "What kind of development?" Emily asked, fear crystallizing in her chest. Ryan hesitated, clearly debating how much to tell her. "We found the traitor, or rather, he revealed himself. There's going to be a meeting tonight, him and whoever he's working with, a final confrontation." "That's dangerous," Emily said, standing to face him. "What if it's a trap?" "It probably is," Ryan admitted. "But it's also our best chance to end this. Once we know who's behind everything, we can neutralize the threat, and you can go back to your life." Go back to her life. The phrase that should have brought relief instead felt hollow because Emily's life had fundamentally changed over the past 3 weeks, and especially over the past few hours. Going back meant leaving Ryan, returning to the emptiness she'd been living in before that red dot changed everything. "I want to come with you," Emily said suddenly. "Absolutely not." Ryan's response was immediate and firm. "This isn't your world, Emily. I won't put you in that kind of situation." "You put me in this situation the moment I saved your life," Emily countered. "Everything that's happened since then, living here, working for you, whatever this is between us, it's all connected. I'm already involved." Being involved and being present at a dangerous confrontation are two very different things. Ryan took her face in his hands, his dark eyes intense. "I need to know you're safe. That's non-negotiable. Vincent will stay here with you. The building's secure. Nothing will happen to you." Emily wanted to argue, but she could see the fear beneath his controlled exterior. He was genuinely worried about her, and that concern was touching, even as it frustrated her. "Promise me you'll be careful," she whispered. "I promise." Ryan kissed her forehead, then her lips, a brief, fierce kiss that felt like both a promise and a goodbye. "I'll be back before you know it." Then he was gone, and Emily was left standing in her apartment as dawn began breaking over Manhattan, wondering if she'd just seen Ryan Moretti for the last time. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Vincent arrived within minutes of Ryan's departure, positioning himself by the door like a sentinel. He didn't offer much conversation, but his presence was oddly comforting. Diana called around noon with instructions. Emily should stay in the apartment, avoid the windows, keep her phone charged. The careful neutrality in Diana's voice suggested she knew more than she was saying. "Is Ryan going to be okay?" Emily asked directly. "Mr. Moretti has handled difficult situations before," Diana replied, which wasn't really an answer. Try not to worry. But Emily couldn't help worrying. She paced the apartment, unable to focus on work, or television, or anything else. Her mind just kept spiraling into the absolute worst-case scenarios. Ryan walking right into an ambush, getting seriously hurt, or worse, not making it back at all. When exactly had he become this crucial to her life? How had this complicated, not to mention dangerous, man managed to worm his way past all the walls she'd built up in just 3 short weeks? Evening settled in, the sky grew darker, and the twinkling city lights began to flicker to life way down below. Emily found herself glued to the window, despite Diana's warning earlier, just watching the vast urban landscape, and just wondering where in the world Ryan was at that very moment. Her phone buzzed, startling her. It was a text message from a number she didn't recognize. It simply read, Brooklyn Docks Warehouse 7. If you want to understand who Ryan Moretti really is, come alone. Emily's heart practically stopped beating. This was clearly a trap, and obviously a manipulation designed to get her to do something stupid. She really should just delete the message immediately and tell Vincent everything. But what if it wasn't a trap? What if Ryan was walking headfirst into something even worse than he was expecting, and he desperately needed her help? She glanced over at Vincent, who was standing with his back to her, speaking quietly into his phone. The apartment door was only about 10 feet away. The elevator required a key card to operate, but Emily had been given one specifically for emergencies. And this definitely felt like an emergency. Before she could talk herself out of it, Emily grabbed the code and the key card and slipped quietly out the door. She heard Vincent shout something behind her, but she was already inside the elevator, frantically pressing the button for the parking garage. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably as she called a car service. This was absolutely insane. This was potentially self-destructive behavior at its finest. But the mere thought of Ryan facing danger while she sat safely and soundly in her apartment made her feel physically ill to her stomach. The drive to Brooklyn took a solid 40 minutes with the evening traffic. Emily spent the entire ride second-guessing her impulsive decision, but she didn't turn back, not even once. The docks finally emerged from the urban landscape, looking industrial, isolated, and undeniably dangerous in their stark emptiness. Warehouse 7 loomed in front of her, its windows dark and foreboding, its exterior weather-worn and looking completely abandoned. Emily's driver gave her a concerned look in the rearview mirror. You sure about this, miss? Doesn't look too safe to me. I'm meeting someone? Emily lied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. I'll be fine. She wasn't fine. She was absolutely terrified, but she walked toward the warehouse anyway. Her phone clutched tightly in her hand like it was her only lifeline. The door was unlocked, which set off even more alarm bells in her head. Inside, the space was vast and dimly lit, illuminated only by grimy windows that let in what little ambient city light there was. Emily's footsteps echoed loudly on the cold concrete floors. Hello? She called out, her voice sounding pathetically small in the cavernous space. Movement in the shadows caught her attention. Emily's breath caught in her throat as figures began to emerge. Several men, all unfamiliar faces, moving with a distinct predatory purpose, and behind them, someone she did recognize. Marcus, the young, nervous man from that first night at the restaurant. Ms. Carter, Marcus said, his previous fear now replaced with cold confidence. Thank you for coming. You've made this much easier for us. Understanding crashed over Emily like a bucket of ice water. The text, the location, the setup. This had absolutely nothing to do with helping Ryan. This was all about using her against him, plain and simple. Where's Ryan? Emily demanded, trying her best to sound braver than she actually felt. On his way, Marcus replied with a smirk. We sent him a similar message, saying that you'd come here alone and desperately needed his help. He'll arrive shortly, probably with Vincent and half of his security team, and when he does, we'll be waiting. You're the traitor, Emily stated, the pieces finally falling into place. You've been working against him from the beginning, working for your own interests. Ryan Moretti has been in control for far too long, Marcus corrected her. It's time for some new leadership, And you, Miss Carter, are the perfect bait. He's developed quite an attachment to you. It's almost touching, really. Emily's mind raced, desperately searching for options. Any way out of this mess. She had walked straight into their carefully laid trap, and now Ryan was coming to save her, which was exactly what they wanted him to do. Her phone buzzed in her hand. Ryan was calling. Marcus gestured for her to answer it, a weapon now clearly visible in his hand. "Put it on speaker," he instructed her. Emily answered the call with shaking hands. "Ryan." "Emily, where are you?" Ryan's voice was tight with controlled panic. "Vincent said you left. Tell me where you are right now." "I'm sorry," Emily whispered, feeling a wave of guilt wash over her. "I got a text. I thought you needed help. I'm at the Brooklyn docks, warehouse 7. Stay right there. Don't move," Ryan commanded. "I'm coming." "Ryan, it's a trap," Emily started to warn him, but Marcus abruptly ended the call. "Perfect," Marcus said with satisfaction, a sinister grin spreading across his face. "Now we wait." The next 20 minutes felt like hours. Emily sat on the cold concrete floor, surrounded by men with weapons, mentally cursing her own impulsiveness. She had been trying to help, and instead, she had created exactly the situation that Ryan had been desperately trying to prevent from happening. Then, she heard the distinct sound of vehicles pulling up outside, doors opening, and footsteps quickly approaching the warehouse. Ryan entered the warehouse with Vincent and 3 other men, all moving cautiously and scanning their surroundings. His eyes found Emily immediately, and the initial relief in his expression was quickly replaced by cold, hard anger as he fully assessed the situation. "Let her go, Marcus," Ryan said, his voice deadly calm and even. "This is between us." "Actually, it's much bigger than just us," Marcus replied, his voice dripping with false confidence. "This is about the future of the entire organization. You've grown soft, Ryan, sentimental. That weakness ends tonight." "You actually think that taking me out will give you control?" Ryan's laugh was harsh and humorless. "You're working with the Castellanos. They'll eliminate you the moment I'm gone." "We have an arrangement," Marcus insisted, but Emily could hear the doubt creeping into his voice. "You have a delusion," Ryan corrected him, his eyes narrowed. "They're using you to destabilize my operations. Once that's accomplished, you're completely expendable." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Emily could feel the tension building in the air, weapons being positioned, everyone calculating their next move. Then, Emily noticed something that sent a chill down her spine. A red dot, small and trembling, on Marcus's chest, just like that first night at the restaurant. "Marcus!" Emily shouted, her voice filled with urgency. "Move!" But this time, she wasn't close enough to push him out of the way. This time, she could only watch in horror as Marcus looked down, saw the laser sight, and his expression instantly shifted from smug confidence to sheer terror. The shot came from outside. A window shattered, and Marcus dropped to the ground like a puppet with its strings cut. Chaos erupted instantly. Ryan's security detail moved swiftly to protect him, hauling him toward cover. The other men scattered, shouting and trying to locate the shooter. Emily pressed herself against a concrete pillar, her heart hammering in her chest. This was real violence, real danger, nothing like the organized chaos of the restaurant. This was a fight for survival. Vincent suddenly appeared beside her, his hand gripping her arm tightly. "Stay low. We're getting you out of here." More shots rang out, followed by return fire. The warehouse quickly became a war zone of deafening sound and frantic movement. Emily couldn't keep track of what was happening. She just knew that Vincent was pulling her toward a side exit, that Ryan was somewhere in this chaos, and that everything had gone horribly wrong. They emerged into the cold night air, gasping for breath. Vincent pushed Emily toward an armored vehicle. "Get in. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone but me or Ryan." Then he was gone, disappearing back into the warehouse. Emily sat in the vehicle, shaking uncontrollably, listening to the sounds she couldn't even identify, and praying that everyone would be okay. Minutes passed, feeling like an eternity. The sounds of gunfire decreased, then stopped entirely. The warehouse door creaked open. Ryan emerged, his suit torn, and blood on his shirt, though Emily couldn't tell if it was his. He looked exhausted and furious and relieved, all at the same time. He pulled open the vehicle door. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Are you seriously not hurt at all?" Ryan climbed in beside her, his hand immediately checking her over as if he needed physical confirmation that she was unharmed. "Emily, what were you thinking? Coming here alone? I thought you needed help," Emily said, tears suddenly streaming down her face as the adrenaline crash hit her hard. The text said, "I know," Ryan said, pulling her against him, his arms wrapping tightly around her. "I know, but you could have been hurt. You could have been taken from me. Do you even understand how that felt?" Emily sobbed against his chest, the fear and stress of the past few hours finally overwhelming her. Ryan held her close, his hands stroking her hair, whispering reassurances in a gentle voice she'd never heard him use before. Eventually, she calmed down enough to ask, "What happened in there? Is it over?" "Marcus is gone," Ryan said quietly, taken out by his own partners. The Castellanos decided he was more useful as a message than an ally. The others scattered. Vincent's team is handling the cleanup. "So, it's over?" Emily asked, hope and dread mixing in her voice. Ryan pulled back to look at her face, his expression complicated. "The immediate threat is over. But Emily, you need to understand something. This is my life. Danger, confrontations, people constantly making moves for power. It never really ends. It just changes form." "I know," Emily whispered. "Do you?" Ryan's dark eyes searched hers intently. "Because after tonight, you can't pretend that you don't understand what my world involves. You saw it. You were right in the middle of it. And if you stay, if we continue whatever this is between us, you'll always be connected to this reality." Emily took a shaky breath. "Are you asking me to make a choice?" "I'm asking you to be honest with yourself about what you can handle," Ryan said gently. "I want you in my life, Emily, more than I've wanted anything in years. But I won't trap you in a world that destroys you." Emily looked at this complicated, dangerous, surprisingly gentle man who had completely changed her life in such a short time. She thought about her old apartment in Queens, her waitressing job, her safe but ultimately empty existence. Then she thought about the past 3 weeks, feeling alive, challenged, valued, feeling something real for the first time since her father passed away. "I'm scared," Emily admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Good. Fear keeps you smart. But I'm not leaving." Emily took his face in her hands, looking directly into his eyes. "Whatever this is, whatever comes next, I choose this. I choose you." Ryan's carefully constructed expression cracked, a flicker of vulnerability showing through. "You sure about that?" "No," Emily said honestly. "But I'm sure that I'd regret walking away more than I'd regret staying." Ryan kissed her then, the kiss desperate and relieved and fierce all at once. And Emily kissed him back, knowing that she was choosing chaos over safety, danger over predictability, life over mere existence. The storm had broken, but somehow they had both survived it. Now they just had to figure out what came next. 3 days after the warehouse incident, Emily stood in the office of FBI Special Agent Sarah Chun, wondering how her life had managed to get even more complicated than it already was. "Ms. Carter," Agent Chun said, sliding a file folder across the desk. "We've been investigating Ryan Moretti's operations for 2 years now, and you're in a unique position to help us." Emily's stomach dropped. She had known that this was coming. The authorities had questioned everyone involved in the warehouse incident, but she hadn't expected this particular turn of events. "Help you how?" Emily asked cautiously, trying to keep her voice steady. "By providing information about Moretti Enterprises' operations, internal communications, financial records, business meetings. You have access that we simply don't," Agent Chen explained, leaning forward, her expression earnest. "I know this is difficult, but Ryan Moretti isn't who you think he is." "Then who is he?" Emily challenged, her voice laced with defiance. Agent Chun opened the folder, revealing photographs and documents. He's someone who operates businesses that, while technically legal, facilitate activities that aren't. Money movement, import operations with questionable manifests, construction projects that seem designed more for influence than profit. Emily had seen those same irregularities in the reports she had analyzed. She had noted them, questioned them internally, but had never voiced her concerns aloud. "We can offer you protection," Agent Chun continued, her voice persuasive. "Witness protection if necessary, a fresh start away from all of this. You'd be safe and you'd be doing the right thing." Emily had spent the past 3 weeks learning that right and wrong weren't as clear-cut as she had once believed. Ryan operated in gray areas, yes, but he also protected people, employed hundreds, and maintained a code of honor that mattered in his world. "What happens to Ryan if I cooperate?" Emily asked, her voice barely audible. "That depends on what information you provide. But realistically, Ms. Carter, he'd face serious legal consequences." Emily looked down at the photographs of Ryan. Surveillance shots, candid images, his face serious and guarded in all of them. 3 days ago, she had seen that face soften as he held her after the warehouse shootout, as he had whispered that she mattered more than anything. "I need time to think," Emily said, pushing the folder back across the desk. "Don't take too long," Agent Chin warned, her voice hardening slightly. "The deeper you get into Moretti's world, the harder it becomes to leave. Eventually, you won't have a choice." Emily returned to the apartment in a daze. Diana was waiting, her usually composed expression troubled. "Ryan wants to see you," Diana said simply. "He's upstairs." Emily took the elevator to the penthouse, her mind churning with conflicting thoughts. Agent Chen's offer represented everything she should want. Safety, a clean break, a return to normalcy. But the thought of betraying Ryan, of being responsible for destroying him, made her physically ill. She found him on the terrace, despite the November cold. He was wearing a heavy coat, his hands in his pockets, staring out at Central Park's bare trees and the city beyond. "You spoke with the FBI," Ryan said without turning around. It wasn't a question. "How did you know?" "Because it's what they do. They find leverage and they use it." Ryan finally turned to face her, his expression carefully neutral. "What did they offer you? Protection? A fresh start? My life back?" Emily moved to stand beside him, wrapping her arms around herself for warmth. "They want me to provide information about your businesses." Ryan's voice was controlled, but Emily could hear the tension underneath. And I told them I needed time to think." Something flickered in Ryan's eyes, a brief flash of relief that was quickly suppressed. "You should take their offer, Emily." The words hit her like a slap in the face. "What? This isn't your world. It never was. You stumbled into it trying to save someone, and you've been trapped here ever since." Ryan's jaw tightened. "The warehouse showed you what my life really involves. Violence, danger, moral compromises. You deserve better than that." "Don't tell me what I deserve," Emily said, her anger rising. "I'm capable of making my own choices." "Are you? Because from where I'm standing, you're choosing chaos over peace, danger over safety, a complicated man over a normal life." Ryan moved closer, his dark eyes intense. "I'm giving you permission to walk away, Emily. Take the FBI's deal. Start over somewhere safe. Forget you ever met me. Is that what you want?" Emily demanded, her voice shaking. "For me to leave?" Ryan was silent for a long moment, his expression warring between what he wanted and what he thought was right. "What I want doesn't matter. What matters is you getting your life back." "My life wasn't worth getting back." The words burst out before Emily could stop them. "I was just surviving, Ryan, just existing day to day with no purpose beyond paying bills and avoiding memories. Then you happened, and suddenly I was awake again, alive, mattering to someone." Tears burned in her eyes. "Don't you understand? You didn't trap me here. You saved me." Ryan's carefully controlled exterior cracked, a hint of vulnerability showing through. "Emily, I know who you are." Emily continued fiercely, her voice filled with emotion. I see the gray areas, the compromises, the things you do that aren't entirely legal. But I also see the man who protects his people, who keeps his word, who looks at me like I'm the most important person in his world. That man is worth staying for. Even if staying means living with constant uncertainty, never knowing if another threat will emerge. Ryan's hand cupped her face, his thumb gently stroking her cheek. I can't guarantee your safety. I can't promise you a normal life. I don't want normal anymore, Emily said, her voice filled with conviction. I want real. I want you. Even with all the complications and danger and moral ambiguity, I choose this, Ryan. I choose us. Ryan pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met, or the most reckless. Probably both, Emily admitted, her face pressed against his chest. They stood together in the cold, holding each other as the city sprawled beneath them. Emily knew that this decision would change everything. She had essentially chosen Ryan over cooperation with the authorities, which came with its own set of consequences. What happens now? Emily asked quietly, her voice muffled against his coat. Now we figure out how to build something real in a very complicated world, Ryan replied, his voice resolute. I'll protect you from external threats. But Emily, you need to understand. The FBI won't stop. They'll keep watching, keep looking for leverage. Let them watch, Emily said, pulling back to look at him. They won't find anything, because I'm not going to betray you. Ryan pulled back to look at her face, his expression raw with an emotion he usually kept hidden. I love you. I didn't plan to. I didn't want to risk caring about anyone this much. But somewhere between you saving my life and challenging everything I thought I knew about myself, you became essential. Emily's breath caught in her throat. I love you too, even though it's crazy and probably destructive and definitely not what I planned. Ryan smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. The best things never are. He kissed her then, the kiss gentle and deep and full of promises they would both try to keep, despite impossible odds. 6 months later, Emily stood in a newly renovated office space in Lower Manhattan, overseeing the final details. The sign outside read, Moretti Security Consulting, providing strategic risk assessment and protection services. It was Ryan's idea, taking Emily's unique perspective and analytical skills and building something legitimate around them. She had spent months learning the security industry, obtaining certifications, and building a reputation separate from, but connected to, Ryan's empire. The business was real, the clients genuine. And if some of those clients happened to be people Ryan wanted to help or protect or keep close, well, that was just good networking. Looks good, Diana said, appearing beside Emily with her ever-present tablet. First official client meeting is in an hour. I'm ready, Emily said, a confident smile spreading across her face. And she was. She had transformed from a struggling waitress to a legitimate businesswoman, from someone who avoided complications to someone who navigated them with skill. Ryan appeared in the doorway, and Emily's heart still did that ridiculous flutter after 6 months together. He wore a sharp suit and that slight smile he reserved specifically for her. Proud of you, he said simply, his eyes filled with admiration. Couldn't have done it without you, Emily replied, her voice soft. You could have, Ryan corrected gently. You just didn't have to. That was their relationship in a nutshell. Two people who could survive independently but chose to build something together. It wasn't perfect. The FBI still watched. Threats still emerged periodically. Ryan's world still involved moral complexities that Emily was learning to navigate. But they faced it together, partners in business and in life, building an empire that existed somewhere between Ryan's gray area operations and Emily's desire for legitimacy. That evening, they stood in Ryan's penthouse. Their penthouse now, Emily having officially moved in last month. The city sparkled below them, millions of lives intersecting in patterns too complex to fully understand. Any regrets? Ryan asked, his arm wrapped around Emily's waist. Just one, Emily said, then smiled at his concerned expression. That I didn't meet you sooner. Ryan laughed, the sound genuine and unguarded. We met exactly when we were supposed to. Any earlier, and I wouldn't have been ready for you. And now I can't imagine my life without you in it. Emily turned in his arms, rising on her toes to kiss him, her heart overflowing with love. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. Inside, two people who should never have worked together had built something real and lasting from impossible circumstances. The red dot that had started everything had become a symbol, not of danger, but of change, of the moment when Emily Carter stopped merely surviving and started truly living. She had saved Ryan Moretti's life that night at the Velvet Room, but in the process he had saved hers, too. And that, Emily thought, as Ryan held her close and whispered promises against her hair, was worth every complication, every risk, every uncertain moment. Some debts weren't meant to be repaid. Some were meant to be honored through building something beautiful together. This was theirs, imperfect, complicated, real. And Emily wouldn't change a single thing. Epilogue. 2 years later, Emily stood at a podium addressing a room full of business owners and security professionals. Her company had grown beyond anything she had ever imagined. Legitimate, respected, successful. Ryan sat in the front row, pride evident in his expression. Beside him sat Vincent, now head of their combined security operations. Diana managed the administrative side, keeping everything running smoothly. They had built something together, an empire that existed in the light rather than in the shadows. Ryan had slowly transitioned his questionable operations into legitimate enterprises, with Emily's influence pushing him toward the man he had once wanted to be. It wasn't perfect. Old associates sometimes resurfaced. The FBI still watched, though with decreasing interest as the evidence of wrongdoing became harder to find. Threats emerged and were handled, but they handled everything together. That night, over dinner in a restaurant that felt worlds away from the Velvet Room, Ryan took Emily's hand, his eyes locking with hers. "I have a question," he said, his usual confidence touched with a hint of nervousness. Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Yes?" Ryan smiled, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "You saved my life once. Will you spend the rest of it with me?" The diamond caught the candlelight as Emily's eyes filled with happy tears. "Yes, absolutely, yes," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. As Ryan slipped the ring onto her finger, Emily thought about that frightened waitress who had seen a red dot and acted without thinking. She had saved a man's life, and in the process, found her own. Sometimes the bravest thing you could do was take a chance on something or someone complicated. Sometimes love meant choosing chaos over safety. And sometimes, despite impossible odds, everything worked out exactly as it was meant to. Emily Carter had learned all those lessons. And she had learned one more. The best stories don't start with once upon a time. They start with a split-second decision that changes everything.